Beautiful. All right. Happy Wednesday. Fourth Wednesday of the month is when we have these Schoodic regional meetings. Thanks again for everyone joining and continue to support this forum. I am Greg Paduke, Regional Planner of the Hancock County Planning Commission. I believe everyone on this call is pretty familiar with each other and have met.
Thank you.
Morning, Bob. So this is sort of
Good
a
morning.
follow-up or I guess a continuance of last month's meeting. Last month we did a brief presentation on the Hancock County Housing Needs Assessment, and through that, I mentioned a program or two that came or that has started in Nantucket, Massachusetts, to kind of incentivize housing, and kind of came up with the idea of using this month to share some innovative housing solutions that other towns and areas of the country are implementing and some creative incentives for creating housing. And Olivia did an awesome job of taking a deeper dive into some of those programs on Nantucket that I mentioned. And she's gonna kick things off with some slides and some information about those programs. And then from there, hopefully maybe some others have an idea or two to share. And then I can mention a few others at the end that I found, and we can have a little discussion. So, Olivia, I maybe introduce yourself go real quick to everyone, just in case they haven't met you yet, and then feel free to go for it.
Wait, can we kick out the AI note taker?
Yeah, right about that.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I started out doing the digital and broadband work at HCPC, but I'm supporting some of the housing and climate and anything else that comes up because I'm interested in way too many things. But Greg let me take a crack at researching some Nantucket and other programs. So I'm just going to share my screen now, if Zoom will allow it.
You're your co-host, so hopefully you should.
Okay. I think it's just the Wi-Fi. 'Cause I pressed the share button, but it's just kind of sitting there.
All right, we'll give it a second.
No worries. I think I might try and leave and come back and see if that restarts it. The old have you tried turning it on and off again?
You also froze, Olivia.
Oh
Yeah.
joy.
All right. Well, while we're waiting for her, I'm curious if anyone did any other background research or has heard of any other creative programs or incentives for developing housing that they might want to mention or share. Yes, that we haven't discussed already.
I did see something in I think it was the New York Times about what they're doing in New York State. I don't remember all the details, but they're doing these prefab houses, and if you're a town, of course, they have lots of money. But if you're a town that's willing to put up, I think 10 or 20, they're $175,000. So
Hmm. For prefab housing. And that's a statewide program, you think it is?
yeah, it's for New York State, and I believe it was rolled out by the governor.
Yeah, gotcha. I know she's been is pretty forward in trying to create a lot of housing programs there. But yeah, I think modular housing is definitely an avenue to explore, I think, and incentivizing that was is I think wise. Um, Probably something that has to be done on a state level to make it effective, but I can share one program that I found that sort of relates to that. It is in Frisco, Colorado, and I can share the link. It's called the Housing Helps Program. Um, And I guess somewhat sort of similar. The town pays 10 to 15% of the property's value back to the owner. And in exchange, the owner must accept a deed restriction that whoever either owns or rents the home has to be a member of the local workforce. So that's one of their methods for trying to create housing for local workers. And they had another policy that they put in place is that in certain zones, the density restrictions can be overridden as long as 50% of any additional units are dedicated to the local workforce.
Zoom is not working on my computer.
All right, looks like Olivia and I are going to collaborate here and share screens.
Share the presentation with you again on email.
Okay. I think I have a couple other examples too I can mention later that kind of try to program students incentivize housing for the local workforce. But I find that an interesting way rather than trying to, I guess, find ways to directly build housing. It's also tying into the need for a local workforce and sustaining that year-round population and supporting economic development. So interesting way to go about it. I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts on programs such as that.
I'm sure you're aware that Bangor several months ago approved several pre-designed ADU designs so that if anybody wants to just pull those down off their website, they're kind of have automatic approval.
I knew they had been in process of working on that. I don't know if I knew that they were finally made available, so that's
Oh,
interesting.
okay. I thought that they had been, but my mistake. And also, just
They,
in
they may
case
have been, I just may have not known.
people who are not aware of the organization Strong Towns, the nonprofit out of Minnesota, they have a lot of stuff related to housing. They have one just that was put on 20 hours ago, a LinkedIn post. There's an entry called "The Housing Ready City: A Toolkit for Local Code Reform," which is a lot about cutting red tape to make the whole permitting process more streamlined.
Yeah, I've heard of Strong Towns before. I think I've read some of their stuff. They have a podcast too, that their director runs, and he interviews folks and shares some of his thoughts and experience. Yeah, a lot of forward thinking and ideas there. So that's the link. Those are links that we can share afterwards. People can
Yep.
kind of dive into.
We,
Okay,
we probably have.
go ahead, Alan.
Do you want to do your presentation or?
Oh, we can keep this
Oh,
going.
okay. Yeah, no, our area probably has a lot different problems than the ones you're talking about. We don't have a lot of permitting or inspections or that kind of thing, which is kind of a positive thing for Maine. It's kind of unique in that way that it has a pretty low regulatory footprint, at least from the state level. And probably the main problems are the high costs of doing things. I mean, there's not central sewer systems or something for the most part, and you have to, if you build a house, you have to put all that infrastructure in, and there's kind of there's a shortage of local labor for people doing that, and a pretty high cost of developing a property. And then you get to in most towns there's not really any opposition to people building a standard single family house that way. But if you want to build something different, there's a lot of local opposition to doing that. A lot of the programs like, you mentioned that people could build a prefab thing or something. And if somebody wanted to go in and do a lot of that, then, in some towns, there'd be a lot of opposition to that, organized against it. So I think it's a little bit different problems than a lot of other states have here. I mean, we got a lot of advantages, but a lot of high costs of just the general, construction, in doing things.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. I think as far as like the opposition to prefab units, things like that, I think education and kind of information about that can hopefully sway that over time.
Yeah.
and certainly the environmental challenges, constrictions are a challenge. I did try to do some research into, I guess, how infrastructure projects and things like that are incentivized. And the only ones I could really come across were really from a state level. So that's kind of above what the Schoodic area can do. But trying to be creative in those regards is, yeah, always important.
Has,
And Bob, you just shared zero energy homes.
yes. Has anybody had a chance to take a look at their model home in Surrey? This is work that Caroline Pryor, who was a project manager and worked for Maine Coast Heritage Trust, and then a consultant, but she's been working on energy efficient, affordable houses. So they have one of the examples, if you go to that link, is the price point is like 275 for a brand new home built that's energy efficient. So and that's what they're trying to tackle is to make it affordable for people in that 50,000 to 100,000 income. So I need to follow up with Caroline and love to take a look at the house and get some more information. But that's an effort that's happening locally.
Bob, did you say
Bob,
75,000?
What's
75?
that?
Did you say 75,000?
No,
Oh, I was
275,000.
gonna say, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
wouldn't that be
Is that
nice?
a net zero kind of
Yeah.
house, or is it net zero or just high efficiency?
It is energy is yeah, net zero energy, net zero
That's
home.
that's for like a 1,100 square foot or something, single family house.
Yeah, I can real quickly, I can just share.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a standard single family
on
home.
the website that Bob shared, it's one of the tabs, one of the little
Yeah.
blocks under the picture of the house that says net zero. And you
Oh,
tab into it and it explains what net zero means and that it means that net zero homes have very low or no heat or and electric bills, year-round comfort and consistent temperatures, healthy indoor air quality, relatively low maintenance over time, and no fossil fuel resilience, and a significantly reduced carbon impact. So that's all within the thing that Bob shared.
Yeah.
is that a modular or site built? Just quickly, I'll look at the website. But is it very much?
I they're construct
Looks like a
I
modular.
need to find out more. Yeah, have to read
Yeah.
through more about it. So
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look at the website. That
questions?
sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, Caroline and her team made a visit to our office, I don't know, a month or two ago. Did a brief presentation. They're in the process of trying to find a manufacturing facility, and they're hoping to look in the Ellsworth, Bangor, Searsport area to find that facility. But definitely gaining momentum. And I dropped a link in here. Bob, I don't know if you were aware, there is a site visit planned on Friday to the home. Um, it's being organized through the Musson Group and the MDI, Mount Desert Island Housing Solutions Initiative. And they're planning a bus trip. Hopefully the details are in that link. I can send you more information too. And whether you decide to go on the bus, if there are seats available, or just meet folks at the home, they're planning on meeting at the house around 9:30 and doing a tour and doing a little Q&A. And I believe Caroline and for other folks from Zero Energy Homes will be there. So that's this Friday, the 26th, if there's interest. I have not been able to visit the home, but yeah, we'll look to at some point.
Great.
And Tom, you
Okay,
asked if it
Olivia.
is modular.
Oh,
The website does say modular.
yeah.
That's a modular. Yeah, looks.
I think they are off-site. And yeah, that's the part of the reason they're trying to find a facility is to
Get rid of
get
the
those
shipping
homes produced at a
costs.
faster rate.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, let's do it. Olivia is here. She is ready. We're going to talk about some housing programs on Nantucket in Massachusetts.
Beautiful, beautiful. So hopefully the screen is shared with y'all through Greg's computer, but just going over two case studies. One is Housing Nantucket, which is run by a nonprofit organization that's working with the Nantucket Housing Authority. They started in 1994, and their mission is to ensure that there's equitable access to rental and home ownership solutions for Nantucket's year-round community, and their programs, which they have four, encourage, create, and protect quality workforce housing that remains price accessible for future generations. And just included a little overview of which one do I?
Could we just
A little overview of Nantucket, Massachusetts. So it's an island community, year-round population of over 14,000 that balloons up to approximately 80,000 seasonally. And this is all based on 2020 data. A land area of 47.8 square miles and a median household income of 116,750. They have about 12,500 housing units, with just over 5,000 of those occupied, and 77.2% of those housing units are valued at 1 million or more, which a lot of these numbers might be higher or similar in terms of median household income and numbers of people to Maine. But in terms of the pressures that they are facing with large seasonal markets, trying to find equitable workforce housing, and maintaining price accessibility, it feels very similar to what we're experiencing here. And so their first program is Covenant Homes and Lots, which offers home ownership opportunities to moderate income year-round islanders. And I think in previous conversations, we've delineated the need for affordable rentals, but also affordable home ownership opportunities for people to really lay down roots and be part of communities. And this program in Nantucket has created 120 permanently affordable houses. And so this allows property owners with more than one residential dwelling on a parcel to sell one at a permanently affordable price. And so they set a price cap, and then if things change or decrease, they will decrease the price down, but they won't increase the price up. They can also sell off development rights for a portion of their parcel. And they have two types, which the condo allows separate ownership of the dwellings, but they have some guidance on how to set that up for shared septic and driveway and other infrastructure. And that helps decrease the overall cost of having that secondary or tertiary dwelling and being able to sell that. They also have secondary and tertiary lots, which allows one lot to be up to 3 separate lots for zoning purposes. And you have that larger, usually larger market value lot, and then the secondary and tertiary lots are capped at a certain amount for resale. And that's part of the covenant, is when they are resold at that affordable price, as opposed to being in that system for one go and then being immediately sold again for a higher price. They also have an affordable rentals program, and so they currently have 62 rental units ranging from studio apartments to 4-bedroom homes, and these are available for low, moderate, and middle income residents. And when a unit becomes available, tenants are selected from the ready to rent list, which people apply online. But that ready to rent list is not first come, first served. It aims at creating an equal representation of different income brackets over that total number of rental units. It also works to match people with housing opportunities that meet their needs. So they're not putting one tenant in a 4-bedroom house because that tenant can afford a little bit more than someone who might need more rooms for their children or other dependent family members. And then this is just kind of their annually they reset what their rental limits are. And these are units that are owned by Housing Nantucket, the nonprofit, and rented out through them. Some of it is houses or properties that people have sold them or donated them. Others are ones that they have built or relocated to their own land, which gives them better control of being a nonprofit in the housing business as opposed to putting this accessibility or affordability cap on kind of for-profit owners or landlords. And then program 3 is house recycling. So this is just folks donating structurally sound dwellings, and this could be they are rebuilding or have another vision for their property, or there's a structure that they don't want to do a covenant lot, but they also don't want that structure anymore, would rather have something else. And so those either end up as year-round rental units on Housing Nantucket land, which puts them into the affordable rentals rotation. They can also be sold to third-party buyers if they can't be used in Housing Nantucket programs. And so the proceeds from the sale of those buildings fund their other community housing initiatives. And they have an ideal structure is a small dwelling, less than 22 feet wide and less than 2 stories in good condition with easy access to a paved road, to avoid someone saying, hey, I have a house you can have, and it's 5 miles down a gravel road with a barely 1 lane access point. And sometimes these recycled houses are worked into their Covenant Homes program, or affordable rentals program. So on Housing Nantucket's website, they have a list of success stories. And it's interesting to see the combination of all of their programs. That sometimes it's someone starting out in an affordable rental and they buy a covenant lot, and then they're able to buy or get at a cheaper price a recycled house to put on that covenant lot, or people set up a covenant lot and then sorry, noise. And then have that extra dwelling set up for to be sold to others as opposed to the person buying it maintaining residence in it. And then their 4th program is lease to locals. And this was piloted as a privately funded program with another nonprofit. But in August of 2024, the town of Nantucket was awarded $450,000 to relaunch the program with Housing Nantucket. So this is the program where the municipality, which Nantucket's weird because it's a town and county government all rolled up into one. But this is where that town government really gets involved with the programs. The others might be through finding other funding sources, but this is the most outwardly involved. And this one provides a multi-year financial incentive to property owners for converting housing units, some that are currently short-term rentals, into year-round rentals for residents who work on Nantucket. And so property owners who rent to low to moderate income residents who work on Nantucket receive $4,500 to $9,000 in incentives per tenant. And the incentives per qualified tenant increase as the size of the housing unit increases. So if you were renting a 4-bedroom house, you would get a higher incentive because they understand that you could get a lot more money for that renting it out as a short-term rental. So they're trying to even that a bit. And the program structure is just verifying that a property qualifies for the program. And part of that is making sure that it is safe and healthy housing. There's not mold and all sorts of things that pose health risks or might have to have a tenant booted. And then they secure tenants and sign a 12-month lease subject to a rent cap, and they have to be subject to an affordable rent cap to be able to participate in this program. Then the property owners complete a full application in order for that like financial incentive to actually be given to them. And then Housing Nantucket ensures compliance and checks with the property owner and tenant for checks midway and at the end of the lease to make sure that everything was compliant with the program. And the program is supported by the online infrastructure of Placemate, which is the local housing marketplace for vacation towns, which brings us to kind of well, not the next case study, but this is just some examples of cost of incentives per unit size. And in this instance, for the lease to locals, the incentives decrease as the years increase. So you get more of an incentive for your first year of renting to a low to moderate income household or qualified tenant. And then your third year, you would be getting much less, which is not how all of their programs go. Which brings us to Placemate, and they match vacation home owners with trusted vetted locals seeking housing. Their mission is to help local employees secure housing in tourism-based communities across the country through innovative and private partnerships. And so the first program, which does exist on Nantucket, leased to locals, explores innovative local partnerships that provide property owners cash incentives to convert their units into long-term rentals for local employees. Currently, this exists in California, Massachusetts, and Nevada. And these programs are overseen or funded by local governments or nonprofits. So in Nantucket's case, it's funded by Town of Nantucket, but operated and managed by the nonprofit Housing Nantucket. But these incentivize property owners for just the duration of one lease in most markets. So after that 3 years is up with that qualified tenant or qualified group of tenants, there's not really something that keeps those houses in the system, which might be a fault or might be an opportunity to innovate more. But the way that the program is structured is Placemate will go in and work with local housing experts to determine the type of housing inventory they want to target with their program. And then Placemate will go and determine the optimal incentive structure and amounts, and then reach out to property owners who would qualify for the program. So it's town or group meets with Placemate, tells them all the info. They do all the fun financial formulas, and then the units will only go to local employees and their families. And Placemate ensures that compliance and reporting on program impact is done. They also have another program called Rooted Renters, which is just in its pilot stage. And so this is happening in Truckee, California, and Ketchum, Idaho. And so Truckee financial incentives are provided for property owners who offer below market rate housing to local workforce members for 3 years. The payments are based on unit size. And the interesting thing about rooted renters as opposed to lease to locals is the payments get progressively larger to incentivize property owners to maintain their long-term rental. So instead of the first year having the largest incentive, you basically increase as the years go up to 3 years to incentivize people to enter and remain in the program. And then property owners must rent their property to a qualified household. And I included this information because it's interesting to see how they delineate what a qualified household is. So for Truckee, it's 50% or more of the adults over 18 work at least 20 hours a week, and that's average throughout the year. So if you were having someone lobstering and they didn't do winter work, that wouldn't be an issue for an employer located in the geographic boundaries of the Truckee-Tahoe Unified School District. So this kind of hints at the fact that you can determine what the geographic location would be in terms of the boundaries. And the annual income for all adults in that household cannot exceed $130,800. And then Ketchum, Idaho, that was interesting because that was an average annual household income of all adult tenants must be less than 85,000. But 50% or more of the adult tenants must meet one of the definitions, and that's local employee, local senior, and local person with a disability. And so that is cool to see a program that's incentivizing and focusing on workforce, but has brought in seniors and people with disabilities, which is another kind of topic of housing, and how to provide that. And that's enough of me talking. I will say something that I did not put on here is the closest thing to this that I found for Maine is the Maine landlord, I think, preservation program. And so landlords that are renting to folks that qualify for like the housing vouchers, I believe the state pays a certain amount of that rent, which creates kind of like an affordability cap that doesn't mean the landlord doesn't get the full value. It just means some is coming from the tenant and some is coming from the state subsidizing it. But it also allows for landlords to qualify for up to $5,000 over the course of a year in repair grants for one housing unit. So there's another incentive where they're improving the rental housing. There's also another incentive where they have up to $1,200 in kind of repair fees if something goes wrong and their tenant moves out and the place is a mess. It kind of takes some of that fear and stress away, on top of that security deposit. But that's the closest thing that I was able to see in Maine. And now I will actually shut up.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks for doing
Olivia.
that research.
Any initial thoughts, comments, spark any ideas or questions?
I was just wondering what the sources of funding for those programs you were discussing were. Were they private programs or state financed or?
It's a lot of private donors or foundations, um, finding ways to generate income through like the housing recycling program and also putting funding from the rental properties back into the program as a nonprofit. I highlighted where there was state funding coming in, but that might be an opportunity where if something similar were to happen up here, finding grant opportunities that would create that pot of funding for at least beginning it. But the partnership of a nonprofit, similar to this with town government, to me, it was really interesting seeing, okay, housing is something that towns have to deal with, but in what way do they need to show up? Because you don't necessarily want your like town government to be your landlord, because that puts you in a lot of weird situations. But figuring out, does it cost, it raises the question, does it cost more to work with a nonprofit and have them maintain housing and incentivize homeowners or landlords in the area? It's just, does the town want to take on a bunch of financial responsibilities, or does it make more sense to incentivize people who already have the housing stock? And I feel like that's a question that's come up in terms of how involved the town should be. if there's interest in it, I could probably find their financial statements for the past couple of years and see what mix of funding they are receiving for those housing programs.
Are there any models of self-sustaining programs or just nonprofits, but the they balance market rate against the supported housing or something to sustain the projects?
I liked the I liked the one where someone could put a house on their property and sell it to someone else, as long as it's reasonably priced. And I would think that would be attractive, especially to elderly people around here who might have land, a house they want to hang on to, but that might make all the difference. I mean, we allow the ADUs now, but the fact that they could actually build it and sell it and maybe have some tweak the zone. No, we don't have zoning, but tweak ordinances to allow it.
Yeah, Maine, I mean, through LD 2003, there are some of those incentives that can kind of help develop programs like that. Every lot can have at least two dwellings, and so programs to incentivize how to use that second dwelling. There's opportunity there.
Those are all
And
owned by the same person as like an ADU as a rental. I think that what Jackie is referring to was the model in there where you could actually sell off another ADU on your property.
and that sounds really awesome from the standpoint of like people actually investing in home ownership in a more affordable or accessible way. But uh taking out the if I make an ADU now I have to be a landlord and they have to be right next to me. So it could kind of incentivize or lead some of the conversations to what part of my property that's still accessible could I siphon off either as a lot for someone to accessibly afford, and then put like a modular home or something else on. And then I can wash my hands of it once it's sold and once we figure it out. But I get some control in saying, okay, small amount of development that has this impact on me and my ability to live on this property. But I get control over how it impacts me before anything weird happens.
And the other big issue here is money. I know on the program at NBI, clearly they found people with deep pockets to fund what they've been doing. I know that would be a struggle for us here. But and I mentioned this at another meeting. I've talked to someone, a builder, who said that if there was a central, like kind of what they did in Deer Isle, central septic, central well, and cluster housing where they could come in and build 6 of them at the same time, that they could do it at a really reasonable price. I don't know who would put up the money to allow them to build it, but I mean, he was thinking definitely under 200,000, maybe 750 square feet.
For a cluster.
Yeah, say a 2-bedroom. And I mean, and one thing they found in Deer Isle was that a lot of the people that wanted those townhouse rentals they were single people. So the next crop, I don't know where they're at with it now, but the next crop in Stonington, and I think those communities are very similar to us here. In Stonington, the next crop of housing was going to be in Stonington. Again, I don't know how far they got with it, but they were going to be definitely doing 1-bedrooms and I think maybe even studios. So, because they saw that's where the need was.
Mhm.
Well, a lot they could, towns could do some of that right now in terms of, what the idea was that you could partition your lot into smaller sizes and sell off part of it, and that's a zoning issue that the reason you can't do that kind of a thing, and the towns could change that if they wanted to right now. And the cluster housing, I mean, that if somebody came in and wanted to do that in maybe Sullivan or Goldsboro would probably not have too much trouble doing it, but in other, like Lemoyne or Winter Harbor or Sorrento, it has to go to it becomes a subdivision and then it goes to the planning board, and I think they would not allow it in those places. I don't think people would, generally put the effort into trying if,
Well, any piece of property that you're going to put a certain amount of dwellings on,
yeah,
even in Sullivan and Goldsboro, falls into subdivision
yep,
qualifications.
yep,
And your biggest your biggest obstacle with putting multiple houses in a spot is the same thing that they have the modified legislation that if you have a 5,000 square foot lot, you can put up a dwelling to put 5 units. Well, but you need public water, public sewer. No
yep.
one around here has that.
Well, like the
So
idea,
a rental has public water, but you got the need to make sure it's in the spot that you can do anything with.
yeah.
Yeah, but we didn't,
Well,
they
So
didn't
there's
have,
obstacles.
in Deer Isle, they don't have public water and sewer at this location. But what they did have were people that raised about $2 million.
Well,
See,
somebody brought up the idea of cluster housing, which, we don't have the infrastructure here, but that's kind of the way to have a mini infrastructure. You have a large common septic system and a water system, for somebody said 6 houses or it could be 10 houses or something. And that's the way to have a higher density of houses, and again, like Ray said, it becomes a subdivision and it has to get approval. And, just from a feeling in Goldsboro or Sullivan, it would probably get approved. There's not a lot of people probably against that, but in other places it probably wouldn't. That kind of a thing.
Well, historically here, I came across looking through some old files, and I came across a proposition that was set forth to build 24 housing units. Some one bedroom fully handicapped accessible, some one bedroom regular, some 2 bedroom, some 3 bedroom with a like a common space to do laundry and all that, like a little community room and all, with a separate septic system around. And this was probably back, I want to say early 90s, and it went to planning board and was denied.
Okay.
And the consensus was, well, we don't want that around here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Has that changed that much? I don't know, but we're talking 30 plus years. Oh, you could have had that many
Yeah.
people putting that much money into the town, all the tax structure. The land still sits vacant that was
Yeah.
proposed to
Yeah.
do on.
Yeah.
But
I know that's
it's
the
like,
real
so all
problem
these
here.
opportunities, and then people just go, we don't want
Yes,
that.
exactly.
Okay.
And Sullivan's one of the more ones that you would
No, it's
expect to be
just
able to. I mean,
the
the
development.
people are more open to that, and other ones are, probably a lot less receptive to building something like that. But it's the main. We have different problems than other places. The high costs, and cluster housing would be one way to get around that. To build the common septic system and water system. But then you get to the practicalities of, you buy a piece of land and you want to develop it, you're putting all this money in it, and you do the drawings and the stuff, and then you try to get the permit to do that. And and in some places you wouldn't even try because it wouldn't fly. And in other places, like Ray, I'm kind of surprised at Ray's story, because I people in Sullivan I've talked to have kind of generally been more in support of that kind of thing. But and Goldsboro as well.
It's a lot different.
I don't know, Josh,
Well,
what do you think? What do you think about Goldsboro? I mean, would people support something like that? Somebody wanted to build a project like Ray described. Would people organize against it, or would it be supported?
I think there would be some opposition, but I don't think there would be as much opposition as there would have been in the 90s when it was a much
Right.
different dynamic here. That sort of thing was kind of way out of the ordinary. There wasn't much model for it elsewhere. And I can see how the suspicion would have been a lot more than there would be now when the dynamics have changed, the populace has changed some. There's a clear need. It's a problem that's recognized by everyone. But you'd still have the people pushing back against it just because they have moved here and they want to keep it the way
Yeah.
it was when they thought it was so cool to move here.
Yeah. Yeah.
and we do have that apartment building going up on Route 1.
Yeah,
6 units.
six units. Yeah.
Yeah, is he gonna do 12?
Yeah, we do have somebody putting up or who's put in permits to build 6 units on Route 1 near our fire station 3, so towards the Steuben line.
Yep.
And he might possibly go further with another 6. So I think there are some developers starting to bite and realizing that there's definitely a need that could probably rent or sell the units very quickly.
So what's the status of that? Has that been approved or is it just in talks?
Gosh, I think that it has been
Close.
approved. I think it's been approved by the planning board. If not, it's being considered soon.
Okay.
I've kind of lost track, but it's serious interest. He's not just kicking
Yeah.
tires.
Yeah.
And he has,
I think that
he's done this in
I
Machado.
think that the scale is more appropriate, and Ray was talking about 24-unit development, which around here would be huge.
Be scary for
I think
some,
that
yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
but I
that
mean, it's not.
this six
It's not.
units or 3 units or
Yeah, but it's not like, well, it probably wasn't 24 McMansions if you're talking about some
no,
that
no,
are.
no. I understand, but it's very different from anything else that exists in the area, other than Ellsworth.
Yeah. Well, I think that I don't know. I think when you get to a time of crisis, people are more willing to try different things, and I think that we are at
Well, I think cluster
crisis
is
point.
definitely, yeah. Well, and also demand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people are slowly coming around to that point is that there's such a need. We need to start being be a little more open and be a little more creative.
Yep.
And that education and conversations, are slowly continuing. And I think, if there's opposition, having that sort of engagement is helpful. It's not always going to win you over, but it's helpful. Um, One of the uh, education guidebooks that HCPC is eventually going to put out is focusing on, I guess, septic and water systems in areas where it's not easily and readily available to help support cluster housing and things like that. So down the road, hopefully there will be some models researched and shared to, support some of those projects that we talked about.
Off the top of my head, I know like I went to College of the Atlantic and they have what they call the village, but it's about um six housing units. We're not 6 housing units, but it's 3 buildings. There are 6 different dormitories, and they each have about 6 bedrooms, maybe 8 or 9, and they're all composting toilets. And it's actually done in a way where it's not scary and it's very user friendly and it deals with the septic issue very well. But they're like right on the waterfront kind of area. But COA has been doing a lot in terms of upping their housing by purchasing other buildings, but also innovating in that way.
Yeah, I would love to know more about how they did the septic and the well at in Deer Isle. It's very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I've been in contact a couple times with Pamela Duell, who is the executive director of the Island Housing Trust down there. Um, so maybe a conversation with her could be good. And I know she kind of came in after that project started, but she should have some information or at least know who else to talk to. So
If I'm trying to remember, because Josh and I went through there to look at it, and I think the cost per square footage, was it like 400 something? It was
no
really,
recollection.
I'd be interested in that too. Because again, they did have a lot of money. They got some private money and
yeah,
beautifully landscaped, freshly landscaped trails, very nice. Couldn't be nicer. But
yeah. And
again,
that was an example too of partnering with a conservation organization. Island Heritage Trust was a partner in that project, and so sure they contributed to some of that fundraising and side aspect as well.
yeah.
Um, that's another guidebook that we'll eventually be working on is models for partnering with conservation organizations and land trusts and how to make housing projects work. And that's all coming up in the next year. So
It's interesting
coming
about the
eventually.
composting toilets too, because they have those incinerator ones. I think they're pretty user friendly. They
They
use a
are.
lot of, they use a lot of power, but they're pretty user friendly.
I don't know if any of you have heard of the company called Dooryard, which makes ADUs. They're based in southern Maine, Brunswick, or Portland or something. I don't know all the details, but they've had at least two projects they've been involved in, one in Madison and the other in more recently in Rangeley. So they prefab their ADUs off-site and then they bring them in. So there are some, benefits to scaling production and so forth to keep their prices down. But I don't know what they cost delivered. If you can go on their website and buy your own, they start at like 275, not counting your site work. So that's not cheap. I don't know how much cheaper they are when they're doing multiple units in one location, but they're actually have done a couple of projects.
That's really nice.
Don't know if I've heard of Twitter. I've heard of backyard ADUs. That's another one that's
Yep.
on in southern Maine. So I
Yep.
feel like more of these companies, I don't know how much competition there is, but more of this I feel like will start now that ADUs are kind of at the forefront of housing option.
Yeah, and I talked to their Dooryard CEO a year ago after Camoin Associates did our housing study because the consultant for Camoin happens to know the CEO. They're like neighbors or something in Portland. And so I had talked to her a long time, and they're very interested in learning more about efforts that we have underway here, because I'm sure that they would try to bid or whatever on any solution that might be in their wheelhouse. But I'd
Yeah.
be curious to see what their on the ground costs have been in Madison and Rangeley.
I missed a meeting or two, I think, and I apologize. And Josh is really good at keeping me up to date. But where is this little committee at in terms of setting up a housing authority?
Pretty much ground zero. It's been, I think, briefly brought up, like in the SALT meeting, and kind of here and there, but no in-depth discussion or I guess in-depth research at that point. But I think
Was
some sort of entity is an option for sure. Yeah.
was was the thinking that you would have a housing authority for this group of towns, but yet each town would have jurisdiction and ownership over their own housing, their individual housing, right? So in other words, we wouldn't be building in housing in Gouldsboro for people in Sullivan. Was that the thinking, or so the overall umbrella organization would be multi-town to share the burden or the responsibility or whatever you want to call it.
We didn't get that far.
You didn't get that far.
No.
Okay.
That's far. I think the general idea there was some sort of third party entity that would either help develop housing or at least manage and operate housing so the towns didn't have that direct responsibility. And kind of, helping with deciding or defining strategically where that housing should be and just being that partner so the town doesn't have that direct role in managing and operating housing. That's kind of where we
Okay.
landed, I guess, is an
Yeah, and,
idea.
and the good thing is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's already these housing trusts around, like MDI, and boy, they've been through the ringer with various things, I know.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are
They,
models out there.
yeah.
Yeah, that could definitely be another topic conversation for sure. I think maybe getting someone from or the CEO from Dooryard to talk about what they do could be an interesting topic at some point. We were talking about maybe trying to find some sort of speaker or presenter for the next month's meeting. Topic dependent, but that's kind of what we were thinking. To go along with ADUs, I want to share one more, I guess, incentive program that I found. Portland, the one out in Oregon, had a pretty significant increase in ADU development, partially because they had a lot of policy change. Again, Portland is in Oregon is a little different than, rural Schoodic area, but ideas can still be applied or, changed. And one of the things they did was kind of eliminate the or waive permit and service connection fees for developing ADUs. And by doing so, to get that waiver, they the developer of the ADU could not list it as a short-term rental. And so over at any point over the next 10 years. So it was one way to use their existing policy for creating ADUs and then kind of bake in, okay, this ADU is going to be for someone year round and local by waiving those initial fees. If someone did want to develop it as a short-term rental, they wouldn't get that benefit. But that's one thing that Portland did. And since from what I found between it was 2009 to 2018, the number of permits issued yearly for ADUs increased from 25 to 472. So it was a pretty significant jump.
Wow.
Combining that new policy, citywide and statewide, as well as the ability to waive those permit fees. So, another idea, another program out there that's been implemented before.
Speaking about ADUs, I can share a story from Sullivan. There was a neighbor of mine that over by that Blaisdell Wharf property over there, that Cynthia Perkins, who she built an ADU kind of before this law came in. She had enough property and stuff, but she built it in order to have it be an Airbnb. That was her purpose in doing it. But, as she got closer to being done, she knew somebody that needed a place to live, and she ended up, renting it as a full round year place, and, kind of a guy that was in construction and, needed a place to live, and it worked out really well for her. And, just a lot of these restrictions would only stop people building it, because she may have not even built it if there were restrictions on what to do with it, or who she could sell it to when if she decides to sell her house, or that just when you have restrictions, you're kind of stopping people from doing things. They avoid doing it here and go do it somewhere else or something, because even if you don't want to do a certain thing, you don't know who, when you sell it, you don't know, maybe the next guy wants to use it for that purpose or not, or something. So I just throw that out there.
No, that's great. Yeah, two sides to every coin.
Yeah.
Incentivizing just ADUs for a certain purpose might de-incentivize someone from building an ADU, but depends on really your housing goals at the moment, I guess, and what you're trying to reach. But yeah, that's a fair point for sure.
I mean, I think the barriers to building them in this area, I mean, are just costs and getting labor and all the practical things, more than being no land or no places to build them or anything, which is probably different than a lot of places.
And isn't there a new state law that we're not talking, what is it, LD 004? What was one, the original? ADU, anyway.
Yes.
Didn't it go through this year that actually reduces setbacks, doesn't put any limit on size? Did I imagine this, or?
It makes it so you can build additional houses on like two houses on a lot and things. It went through about maybe 2 years ago, something like that.
No, this is something new, Alan.
What?
That
The new one?
I don't know all the details of, but there's something in the works about reducing those setback and other requirements. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if the full details. Maybe that's something I can look into. Maybe we could talk about that.
Okay. Sorry,
Yeah,
I didn't mean to jump in.
Yeah.
And not limiting the size too, not limiting the size.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I can't imagine how that would fly in southern Maine, but
Yeah.
There's
we've done. Oh, go ahead.
I'll forward an email to you, Greg, and you can forward it to everybody else. It was a bulletin sent out from Freddie Flaherty law firm on July 2nd. This is related to the legislation LD 1829, which is this most recent update on the ADU stuff. It addresses growth, prohibiting municipalities from enacting rate of growth ordinances that limit residential development in designated growth areas. It allows additional ADUs in areas that have growth areas or town water and sewer, and a few other things. So this is what Jackie was talking about, and I'll send it to everybody right now, or to Greg, and you can send it.
Sure.
And they have not yet. This is legislation. The rulemaking has not yet taken place, so there's nothing to come into compliance with right now, but it's on the way.
And one
Right,
thing
right.
I would want to know more about is that program in Nantucket where you're allowed to build a house or somehow get some help to build a house on your property and sell it. I never heard of that. I really like that a lot because I think, especially for cash-strapped elderly people up here, I think that could be a real boon. I'd love to know how that worked and how that's worked out.
Yeah, again, that challenge of people not wanting to be landlords or having bad experience being landlords and would rather just sell off the piece.
Okay, yeah. All right. Sounds like we have a few possible things to talk about.
Generating housing without generating landlords.
That's definitely a topic. Okay, awesome. Well, we got ideas for future topics. This was great. I think it was a good discussion. Thank you, Olivia, for your research and presentation, for taking the time to do that. Do you have a meeting planned for next month? Fourth Wednesday of the month, 10 a.m. is when we do these things, and follow-up email will be sent out with links and notes from this meeting, and then after that, reminder for October will also be sent out. And by then we'll have topic idea and see if we can get a speaker, depending on the topic to get talk, maybe facilitate a discussion. And in the meantime, any ideas, other ideas, thoughts, shoot them over to me, shoot them over to Olivia. Happy to engage with those for future topics.
Yeah.
So until
Hey.
next month, or I guess until, for some of you, until later today.
Yeah. In a few
Thank you
hours.
again for
Thank you
attending.
very much. Thank you very
Yeah.
much for your research.
See
Hey,
y'all.
okay, so Greg and Bob, you want to stay on for a second and go over that budget a little bit? The trail?
Unfortunately, I do not have the time. I wish I
Okay.
did.
Okay. It's nobody, it's in your email. I meant to send it last night, but I didn't hit send, and it's there now. So